The world of small arms just shifted on its axes. And if you thought 2026 would be a quiet year for ballistics, you could not be more wrong.
Right now, both Russia and China are aggressively pushing their own versions of high-velocity armor-piercing calibers, specifically designed to challenge the dominance of the American NGSW program.
We are looking at a total transformation of the infantry toolkit. Let us analyze how the era of the light, high-velocity rounds, like the 5.56 or 5.45, is being pushed aside for something much more aggressive. Russia has unveiled the
2.41mm cartridge, a round they believe will redefine the lethality of the AK platform, while China is quietly testing a 6.8
by 50mm caliber that looks suspiciously like a direct counter to Western advancements. The Kalashnikov concern and Tula cartridge works have not been shy about their goals. Their new 6.22mm round is built around a tungsten carbide penetrator, a core designed for one thing: devastation.
Their patent documents claim this round can penetrate 10 millimeters of armor at a distance of 300 meters. On military forums, the reactions are polarized.
One popular comment from a defense analyst noted that Russia is finally admitting that standard 45 rounds are struggling against modern plates, while others are more cynical, asking if this is just another paper project that will never reach the grunt in the mud.
But the intent is undeniable. They want to punch through NATO body armor with ease. Then we have the mystery of the PLA's 6.8 by 50 millimeters.
Leaked images on Weibo of a QBZ-191 rifle chambered in this new caliber have essentially confirmed the program's existence.
Netizens are already debating whether China is simply playing catch-up or if they have found a superior ballistic profile that balances recoil and power better than the American Spear. Leaked research papers from 2025 show they are measuring the trauma on ballistic gel placed behind armor plates to defeat the American NIJ Level 4 and ESAPI standards.
This all comes down to a fundamental realization that body armor has become too effective.
If you are a general in Moscow or Beijing, a future where every enemy soldier is a walking tank is a nightmare scenario.
This is a strategic pivot, and we are witnessing the start of a global small arms race that might render everything we thought we knew about infantry combat obsolete.
Let us look closer at the data to see who actually holds the upper hand.
Now, let's pull back the curtain on what is happening deep inside the design bureaus of the Kalashnikov concern and the Tula cartridge works. When that patent was registered back in December of 2023, it sent a clear message to the global arms community. You have to understand that these are the two undisputed heavyweights of the Russian military-industrial complex, and their decision to join forces for a single project, the 6.0241mm cartridge, is a massive development. It is not just a minor tweak to an old design. It is a calculated, ground-up response to the evolution of modern protection.
If you examine the blueprints, the designers were not exactly subtle about their intentions.
Every piece of technical data and marketing material I could find prominently features that tungsten carbide penetrator core. For the gearheads listening, you know that tungsten carbide is the secret sauce here. It is incredibly dense, nearly twice as heavy as steel, and it stays sharp and intact even when hitting high-hardness targets. This thing is purpose-built to treat NATO standard body armor like it is made of cardboard.
The patent documents themselves are quite boastful, stating that this new round can punch through 10 millimeters of armor at a staggering distance of 300 meters. To put that in perspective for you, that is a monumental leap in lethality compared to the 5.45mm rounds currently in service.
Naturally, the global defense community is buzzing, but the reactions are deeply polarized. On one hand, you have analysts on military forums arguing that the era of the light caliber is officially dead.
One popular comment noted that Russia is finally admitting their standard rounds are struggling against modern plates. On the other hand, you have the skeptics. Many are asking if this is just another paper project that will never reach the grunt in the mud, especially given the current production pressures.
But there is a very interesting trade-off happening here that we need to analyze. At roughly 2,000 joules of energy at the muzzle, this Russian 6.5
2 millimeters is actually packing about 20% less raw power than the new American 6.8 millimeter cartridge. You might be wondering, why would they settle for less? Well, it seems Moscow is prioritizing shootability and weight.
By sacrificing that extra energy, they are aiming for lower recoil, which means the average soldier can stay on target much more effectively during rapid fire.
They are betting that a controlled hit with a tungsten core is better than a powerful miss. When we look at the ballistic charts, the story gets even more compelling. While the heavier 6-point bullet starts slower than legacy rounds, it retains its velocity with incredible efficiency. It stays supersonic well past the 500-meter mark, providing a much flatter trajectory.
This makes long-range aiming far more intuitive for a soldier in the heat of battle.
It's a fascinating technological middle ground, but as many in the community are pointing out, having a brilliant patent is one thing. Mass producing it is another story entirely.
Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty, the stuff that really gets ballistics nerds like us excited. You've got to take a good look at these charts, or as I like to call them, the sexy charts, found in the Russian patent documents. If you're just glancing at the numbers, you might initially think something is off. You'll notice the upper chart shows velocity versus distance, and the lower one focuses on energy versus distance. At first glance, you might point out that the heavier 6.02 millimeter bullet actually starts out slower at the muzzle than the 5.45 millimeter round currently in service, and you'd be right.
But don't let that fool you. The real magic, the part that really matters for modern combat, happens as the distance grows. While the lighter 5.45 millimeters starts to bleed velocity like a punctured tire the moment it leaves the barrel, this new 6.02 millimeter round acts like a marathon runner. It's heavier, which gives it the inertia and momentum needed to punch through the air with stubborn persistence. We are talking about a round that stays supersonic well past the 500-meter mark.
Now, you might be wondering, why is that such a big deal for a soldier in the field? It all comes down to a flatter trajectory. When a bullet maintains its speed, it doesn't drop as drastically due to gravity over long distances.
This makes aiming significantly easier. It turns a difficult long-distance calculation into more of a point-and-click affair. I've seen the community buzzing about this already.
One netizen recently commented that if these ballistics are real, the days of the old 7.62 by 39 are officially over, and looking at the data, it's hard to disagree.
This new caliber absolutely blows the legacy rounds out of the water. But how does it stack up against the American Spear?
Here is the interesting trade-off. At roughly 2,000 joules of energy at the muzzle, this Russian 6.02 millimeter is actually packing about 20% less raw power than the new American 6.8 millimeter cartridge.
You might be wondering, why would they settle for less? Well, it seems Moscow is prioritizing shootability and weight. By sacrificing that extra 20% of energy, they are aiming for lower recoil, which means the average soldier can stay on target much more effectively during rapid fire.
They're betting that a controlled hit with a tungsten core is better than a powerful miss. Essentially, they have created a round with 40% more muzzle energy than their current legacy rounds, while trying to keep the rifle manageable. It's a fascinating technological middle ground.
By staying supersonic over 500 meters, they are preserving that armor-piercing oomph at ranges where older calibers would simply bounce off a ceramic plate. It's a sophisticated answer to a very modern problem, ensuring that whether a target is at 100 meters or 500 meters, the result remains lethal and the trajectory remains predictably flat. Now, why does any of this matter to the guy huddling in a muddy foxhole? To truly understand the frantic push for this new 6.02 millimeter round, we have to look at the brutal lessons coming straight from the front lines in Ukraine as we move through 2026. You see, the very psychology of the modern infantryman is shifting because the gear on the other side of the trench has become a literal wall. We have all seen that mind-blowing footage floating around online,
The one where an incredibly lucky Ukrainian soldier survives a hit from a 30mm autocannon round because his vest held together.
Sure, it was a ricochet, but the internet went absolutely wild over that clip.
One popular commenter noted that if a vest can deflect a fragment from a vehicle-mounted cannon, what hope does a standard 5.45 round really have? That is exactly the dilemma Russian commanders are losing sleep over.
When you look at the reality of the missions in Ukraine, it is obvious that body armor is no longer a luxury reserved for elite units. It is now the standard for everyone.
This creates a massive headache for Russian Spetsnaz teams operating behind enemy lines. Right now, their ambushes are severely limited. If they run into an unarmored truck, they are fine. But the second a lightly armored vehicle like an American-made Humvee or an older BTR rolls up, their current ammunition just does not have the teeth to bite through. They are essentially bringing a knife to a gunfight when facing NATO-spec ceramic plates.
We often hear people in the gear community joking about the Gucci gear of the West, but for a Russian grunt, that high-quality armor is a terrifying reality.
While the Russian industry is struggling with supply bottlenecks for aramid fibers, even leading to scandals involving fake airsoft plates being issued to troops, the U.S. is doubling down. Just recently, the U.S. Army placed a massive $65 million order for those new LSAT plates.
These things provide the same legendary protection of the ESAPI, which can stop 3 separate hits from a 3006 armor-piercing round, but they do it at 30% less weight. You have to wonder, how does a Russian soldier feel knowing his legacy 5.45 round is essentially a pea shooter against that kind of tech? This is where the 6.02 by 41mm comes in.
It is designed to be the equalizer. With 40% more muzzle energy than the old rounds and that tungsten carbide core, it is a clear attempt to restore the ability to punch through those ceramic plates at a distance. It maintains its supersonic speed well over 500 meters, making the trajectory flatter and aiming much easier for the average soldier. From the Russian perspective, where they are facing an entire force equipped with next-gen NATO armor, this intermediate caliber actually makes more sense for them than it might even for the US. They are not just looking for a new trend, they're looking for a way to stay relevant on a battlefield where the enemy is increasingly bulletproof. Now, for all you AK purists and marksman enthusiasts out there, this is where the metal meets the meat.
We aren't just looking at a new bullet. We're looking at the heavy-duty steel that's going to spit it out. First up, let's take a good long look at the AK-22.
If the classic AK-74 was an agile middleweight, this thing is a heavyweight bruiser.
It's being described by many in the community as a beefy boy, a scaled-up, reinforced version of the Kalashnikov legacy, designed specifically to handle the significantly higher pressures and energy of that new
241 mm round. You can see the difference in the reinforced receiver and the bulkier furniture. It's clearly built to survive the grind of modern high-intensity conflict while delivering that armor-piercing punch we just discussed. But the real conversation starter currently setting the gun community on fire is the SVCH.
This is the heir apparent to the legendary Dragunov SVD, and it represents a massive shift in Russian tactical doctrine.
Based on the latest photos and leaked specs, it looks like Russia is playing a very strategic dual-track game. They're keeping the full-size SVHC in the traditional hard-hitting 7.
62 by 54R for the dedicated long-range specialists, while this new, more compact version is chambered in that 6.02mm hotness for the squad-level marksman.
One netizen on a popular defense forum recently commented, "If the SVHCH actually delivers on the 6.02 promise, the SVD might finally get to retire to a museum with the dignity it deserves." However, skepticism remains high. Another user was quick to fire back, noting that we've heard the standard issue promise before with the AK-12 and the Ratnik programs, and we all saw the production bottlenecks. I'll believe the AK-22 is the new standard when I see a whole division actually carrying them in the field. And that's the billion-dollar question, isn't it?
The Russian Ministry of Defense is making some incredibly bold claims here. They aren't just talking about a specialized tool for elite Spetsnaz units. They are signaling a total, top-to-bottom replacement of their primary infantry weapon and caliber. It's a direct mirror of the U.S. Army's transition to the M7 Spear and the 6.8mm cartridge. We are witnessing a global pivot where the legacy 5.45 and 5.56 rounds are increasingly being viewed as relics of a previous era that can't keep up with modern plate technology.
They want every grunt on the line to have the muzzle energy to render NATO body armor useless, but just imagine the logistical nightmare.
Replacing millions of rifles isn't just a manufacturing challenge, it's a financial and organizational mountain. We have to ask ourselves, are we looking at a legitimate revolution in Russian small arms, or is this another vaporware project destined to stay in the experimental phase, while the average soldier sticks with their iron-sighted AK-74?
The ambition here is massive, but as we know, the gap between a patent and a standard-issue rifle can be a very wide chasm indeed.
But here is where the paradox gets grit-your-teeth real. While the U.S. is lightening its load and beefing up its defense, Russia is hitting a massive wall, and it's not made of ceramic.
It's a supply chain nightmare.
We've seen the reports. The Moscow Arbitration Court is literally suing their only major supplier of aramid ballistic fibers because they failed to deliver 400,000 meters of the stuff.
Now, for those of us who aren't textile experts, aramid is the high-performance, heat-resistant magic that makes Kevlar work. Without it, you're essentially sending troops out in what some disgruntled online commentators are calling cardboard and hope.
There have even been viral videos and numerous reports of Russian soldiers being issued fake airsoft plates or vests that pistol rounds go right through. Can you imagine the horror of finding out your gear is a prop when the rounds start flying?
Contrast that with the American side, where the U.S. Army just placed a massive $65 million order for those new LSAPI plates. These things provide legendary protection against 3 separate hits from a 3006 armor-piercing round, but they do it at 30% less weight.
One netizen recently commented that American soldiers are essentially walking around in tank-like suits, while another pointed out that this level of protection is exactly why adversaries are sweating bullets.
One popular forum post summed it up perfectly. The gap between a $65 million armor contract and a lawsuit over missing fabric is the gap between surviving the front and not.
It is a chilling reminder that in 2026, the tech race isn't just about who has the better bullet, but who can actually deliver a functioning vest to the guy in the mud.
Now that we have explored the Russian side of this arms race, we have to look at what is happening even further east, where the mystery deepens significantly. If you thought the Russian Kalashnikov concern was being tight-lipped, the CCP's 6.8 by 50mm cartridge program is on a whole different level of secrecy.
While the US and Russia are relatively open about their aspirations, most of what we know about the Chinese project comes from the digital shadows of Weibo. You might have seen the grainy photos and scattered clips floating around. The community has already nicknamed it the Taimu 6.8 Next Generation Squad Weapon.
One netizen joked, "You better get it now before the tariffs hit." But behind the memes is a very serious military development.
There is no official acknowledgement from the PLA yet, but a photo of a QBZ-191 rifle chambered in this new 6.8mm caliber tells a story that words won't.
Since China doesn't exactly have a thriving private gun market, a prototype like this almost certainly leaked from a state military arsenal.
We are looking at a potential replacement for the standard 5.8 by 42mm round, which has been their bread and butter for decades.
Just like the Russian design, this Chinese bullet reportedly utilizes a tungsten carbide core. To give you an idea of why that matters, imagine a material twice as dense as steel that refuses to deform when it hits a ceramic plate.
It is built for one purpose, making high-end body armor irrelevant. But here is where the technical analysis gets really interesting and a bit suspicious.
Leaked research documents from 2025 show that China is clocking their muzzle velocity at 740 meters per second. Contrast that with the American 6.8 common cartridge, which comes screaming out of the barrel at a blistering 925 meters per second. You might be wondering, why the massive disparity?
On military forums, experts are debating whether this lower velocity is a failure or a calculated trade-off for lower recoil and better control.
What really caught my eye in these papers was that they weren't just testing the round against metal. They were using ballistic gel placed behind NIJ Level 4 plates, the exact standard used for American SAPI and ESAPI armor.
This is a massive clue.
It suggests these researchers aren't just looking to defend their own troops, they are specifically calibrating their weapons to defeat foreign body armor in a potential hot war.
It feels a bit fishy to label this as a defensive study when everything points towards an offensive counter to the American M7 Spear.
Netizens are already debating whether China is simply playing catch-up or if they have found a superior ballistic profile that balances recoil and power better than the American Spear.
If this project moves into full-scale production, it signals a radical 180-degree turn in global small arms doctrine.
We are witnessing the birth of a secret race, where the prize is long-range overmatch and the total neutralization of the enemy's protection.
But here is the thing, guys. Having a fancy new high-velocity round like the Chinese 6.8mm or the Russian 6.02mm is only half the battle.
Think about it. What is the point of having a bullet that can punch through armor at 600 meters if the guy behind the trigger cannot even see the target clearly? This is where the real high-stakes game of digital overmatch begins. You see, while we have been tracking the ballistics, the militaries of the world have been quietly obsessed with the glass sitting on top of the rails.
In the US, we have the M157 next-generation squad weapon fire control. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, because I have seen the comment sections blowing up.
One user recently joked, "Great, now my rifle needs a software update before I can shoot," while others are genuinely worried that these complex optics are just more expensive paperweights waiting to break in the mud.
And to be fair, reports suggest the M157 has not exactly been a universal crowd pleaser among the troops yet. But the logic is sound. To make a cartridge like the 6.2,
8mm worth the extra recoil and lower magazine capacity, you need a computer to do the math for you. Now let's look at how the PLA is answering that challenge.
unlike the Russian frontline units, where many soldiers are still stuck using legacy iron sights, which, let's be honest, totally wastes the potential of their new
6.02mm round. The Chinese are leaning hard into electronics. They already issue magnified optics as standard, but the leaked footage and social media chatter on Weibo show they are going even further.
We are talking about integrated fire control systems and even augmented reality headsets. Imagine a heads-up display, straight out of a video game, fed directly into a soldier's visor.
This is not just for show. If China is worried about American M7 rifles picking off their troops from distances where a standard iron sight looks like a blurry smudge, they need these AR systems to return effective fire. These headsets supposedly integrate with the rifle's sensors to provide real-time ballistic corrections. It is a total 180-degree turn from the grunts of the past.
Netizens are already debating if this is a revolution in lethality or just expensive tech overkill. One viral post asked, "What happens when the battery dies in a hot zone?" It is a valid question.
But the reality is, as we move through 2026, the smart rifle is no longer science fiction.
The race is no longer just about who has the harder-hitting lead. It is about who has the better algorithm to guide it home. If the PLA can successfully marry their version of the 6.8mm with a functional AR fire control system, the traditional advantage of NATO optics might just vanish. We are witnessing a transition where the infantryman is becoming a mobile sensor platform. And honestly, it is as terrifying as it is fascinating. But here is where the high-tech marketing brochures of the Kalashnikov concern meet the cold, hard mud of the trenches. We have to look at these wild claims about the 6. 2 millimeters round with a very skeptical eye, because Russia has a long, well-documented history of promising the moon and delivering, well, something much closer to the ground. You see, the biggest hurdle isn't just the ballistics, it is the fundamental failure of logistics and the shadow of corruption. Let us talk about the optics gap first. While the 6.2 millimeters is designed for incredible range and accuracy, most Russian frontline soldiers are still being sent into battle with nothing but iron sights.
Without high-quality magnified optics, all that extra energy and flatter trajectory are essentially wasted. It is like putting a Ferrari engine inside a tractor. You have the power, but you can't actually use it on the track.
This hasn't gone unnoticed by the online community, where one viral comment sarcastically noted, "Why build a sniper's caliber for a soldier who can only see as far as his front sight post?"
Then there is the sheer reality of the Russian body armor industry, which is currently in a state of absolute crisis. While we see videos of Ukrainian soldiers surviving 30mm autocannon ricochets thanks to high-end NATO plates, the Russian side is facing a scandalous shortage. Just last October, the Moscow Arbitration Court had to step in because the only major supplier of aramid ballistic fibers failed to deliver 400,000 meters of material. That is a massive bottleneck for the production of Kevlar-style gear.
Because of this, we have seen horrifying reports of Russian commanders issuing fake airsoft vests or plates that even a simple pistol round can punch through.
It is a strategic dilemma that keeps generals awake at night.
If you cannot even provide basic protection that works, how do you expect to successfully roll out a brand new, expensive rifle system like the AK-22? We also have to remember the legacy of vaporware from Rostec. Remember the Sotnik body armor that was supposed to stop a 50 caliber round? It never showed up. The AK-12 was supposed to be a total modernization, but corruption and production shortcuts led to a very mediocre reality. Netizens often joke that the Russian military-industrial complex is competing for the title of best at wasting the public's money.
When you look at these systemic failures, the dream of fully replacing the 5.45mm round seems more like an aspiration than a plan. Most likely, the 6.02mm will be restricted to elite Spetsnaz units who actually have the training and the optics to make it count. For the average grunt, the
45 and the iron sights are likely here to stay for a long time. So, what are we actually looking at here as we stand in 2026? Is this a genuine leap in infantry lethality, or just another case of the global military-industrial complex burning through billions of dollars for a high-velocity fashion trend? When you scan the military forums or scroll through the heated debates on Weibo, the divide is sharp. One netizen recently wrote, "We are trading magazine capacity and weight for a dream of hitting targets at 600 meters that most grunts can't even see without a telescope." And they have a valid point. Whether it's the Russian 6.02mm or the Chinese 6.8mm, every major power is chasing this ghost of overmatch. We have to ask ourselves, are we designing weapons for a war that happens on ballistic charts, or the one actually fought in the mud? Let's look at the convergence because it is truly fascinating.
The United States, Russia, and China have all independently decided that the age of the lightweight 5.56 or 5.45 legacy rounds is effectively over.
The logic driving this is simple but brutal. Body armor has gotten too good. When next-gen plates can shrug off multiple hits from traditional calibers, adversaries have no choice but to upsize. It's a high-stakes arms race in miniature. But as we've analyzed, having a tungsten core penetrator is useless if your frontline troops are still squinting through iron sights because the fancy high-tech optics are stuck in a supply chain bottleneck. Many of you in the community are rightfully pointing out the prototype trap. History is littered with next-gen gear that never actually left the trade show floor. One top-rated comment on a recent analysis thread put it perfectly. I'll believe the AK-22 is the new standard issue when I see a regular conscript carrying one in a trench, not just a Spetsnaz operator in a polished promo video. That skepticism is well earned.
Russia is currently grappling with a massive aramid fiber shortage for their own armor, and China's
8mm program remains shrouded in the digital mist of leaked research papers and social media rumors. This isn't just about the hardware, though. It's a fundamental shift in infantry doctrine.
We are moving toward a future where every rifleman is expected to be a marksman. If these programs succeed, the era of close-quarter suppressive fire might be sidelined by long-range precision.
But the trade-off is heavy, literally. Heavier ammo means fewer rounds in the pack. It's a massive gamble that long-range lethality will negate the need for volume.
As we wrap this up, you have to wonder if the 6mm to 6.8mm range is the ultimate sweet spot or just a very expensive detour.
The US has planted its flag with the M7 Spear, and now Moscow and Beijing are sprinting to catch up. Whether this leads to a more effective soldier or just a more expensive graveyard of failed technology is something only the coming years will reveal.
One thing is certain. The era of the intermediate caliber as we knew it is bleeding out on the battlefields of 2026.
So where does this leave us as we stand in the grit and mud of 2026?
We have spent this time looking at the ballistic charts, the tungsten cores, and the sci-fi optics, but now we have to ask the ultimate question. Is this a genuine leap in infantry lethality, or just a high-velocity fashion trend fueled by billions of dollars?
When you look at the global convergence, it is clear that the United States, Russia, and China have all independently bet their futures on the idea that the age of the lightweight 5.56 and 5.45 rounds is over. The logic is simple but brutal. Body armor has become too effective for legacy rounds to keep up.
But as many of you are pointing out in the comments, having a round that can punch through ceramic plates at 600 meters is essentially useless if the average grunt is still squinting through iron sights because of a supply chain bottleneck.
One netizen put it perfectly when they wrote that they will only believe the AK-22 is the new standard when they see a regular conscript carrying one in a muddy trench, rather than just a Spetsnaz operator in a polished promo video.
We are witnessing a massive strategic gamble, trading magazine capacity and weight for the dream of long-range precision.
Whether this leads to a truly superior soldier or just an incredibly expensive graveyard of failed technology is the billion-dollar question that only the coming years of conflict will answer. One thing is certain, though. The era of the intermediate caliber, as we once knew it, is bleeding out on the battlefields of 2026.